Okay, hello everyone. Good to see people again. It's 1:03, so I think we can go ahead and get started with our July meetup. Hope everyone is doing okay. Hope the weather's not too hot down here in North Carolina. Oh, okay. Yeah, Tom, our guest Tom says that I'm making a pretty bold statement about what I said with not going wrong with 80s music. That's true. There is some 80s music out there that's not so hot, but still, you can't go wrong with Video Killed the Radio Star. How about that? Uh, as I mentioned, fun fact, Hans Zimmer, who you might know from film compositions like the Batman movies and Gladiator and Dune, like he was actually briefly a member of the Buggles. Really interesting fact about him because he was kind of one of the first people in Hollywood film composition to really get into synthesized music. And um, and he brought that experience over from his time with the Buggles. Kind of interesting. So anyway, all right, enough of me being a music nerd. Um, on into our meeting, July 17th, 2024. So, reminder to everyone, and especially to our first timers, that the mission of this user group is to train, educate, and connect data professionals who work with Microsoft Power BI and Microsoft Fabric at colleges and universities, not just in the United States, but across the world. We do have a few international people, and we're very glad to have you here. As always, I will start with a little bit of a reminder about where we are on versions. The latest version of the Power BI service is July 2024. If you're using Power BI desktop in the cloud in the Power BI service, July 2024 is your version. And if you are one of those folks who is using Power BI report server for on-premises, the latest version is May of 2024. Now, in the past, what I used to do is I used to post a link to where you could go and download each version of Power BI desktop. So what I'm going to tell you is that the conventional wisdom these days now is to actually download Power BI desktop from the Microsoft Store because it allows you to do automatic updates every month. So when they release a new version, you would just download it automatically instead of having to go to that link that I share with you each time. So just, you know, for the future, you might want to download it from the Microsoft Store. You'll probably save a little bit of time. I don't think you can download the version for Power BI Report Server from the Microsoft Store, though. So I probably should have kept the link in there for that. Just as a reminder, it's just aka.ms/PBI Report Server. And as Sarah mentions in the chat, you don't have to have IT credentials every month. If you're one of those institutions where admin rights are very limited on your machine and you have to enter IT credentials to download any software, probably a better idea to download PBI Desktop from the Microsoft Store. So thanks for pointing that out, Sarah. Uh, Only one announcement this month, and that is our next monthly meetup is going to be August 28th, 2024. Our featured speaker is going to be none other than Ben Ferry, known as Power BI Guy. Ben is a YouTuber who kind of specializes, well, a lot of different areas of Power BI actually, does a little bit of governance and implementation, but I know him from his work with the Deneb visual. Deneb is a very popular third-party visual that allows you to build custom visuals in Power BI using a language known as Vega. And Ben's done a lot of videos on YouTube about how to use the Vega language to build Deneb visuals in Power BI. Great content. He's going to be talking about, I love the title of this talk. It's Your Report Looks Boring and Nobody Cares. He's going to be talking about how to focus on the essentials of Power BI report design and not get too bogged down on making it look super pretty and spending a lot of time on visual distractions, but just keeping it on the essentials and organizing your reports in such a way that it's optimized for your end users. So should be a really good talk, especially for anyone who wants to learn more about user experience in Power BI. So as usual, after the meeting, look out for an email from Meetup from me and the rest of the leadership team. It's going to contain a link to our YouTube channel, where you'll be able to get recordings of our previous meetings, a link to our Slack workspace to keep the conversation going outside of our regular meetings, Also, links for submitting an idea for a topic or speaker. We really want you to volunteer to speak if you've got something that you think would be relevant, something you want to share with the group, a project that you've been working on, or maybe you know someone that you'd like to volunteer us to kind of reach out to them and see if they want to speak to the group one time. And also, of course, RSVP link for our next meetup, which, as I mentioned, is going to be in August with Ben Ferry. So I don't have any announcements. Jeff, do you have any announcements looking your way?
None from me, Pete.
None for you. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to presentation time, what we're all here for. We're going to hear from Tom Martens. Tom is a Microsoft MVP. He's based out of Germany. Is that right, Tom? Sorry, I forgot to ask you to unmute.
So this is also happening all the time, using Teams as well. Yes, I'm from Germany, living in Hamburg, working for a company in Munich.
Excellent. So Tom's talk is going to be on DAX Foundations, an introduction to the basic workings of DAX. I think this is a really important talk, especially for those institutions who are just getting started with their DAX journey. I've heard from a lot of people over the years who are scared of DAX. They look at it the first time and they think, oh, it's just like an Excel formula, right? Well, it looks like an Excel formula, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And certainly I've seen a lot of people get frustrated with DAX. And I think that, Tom has seen a lot of the same things. And in his talk today, he's going to hopefully, help demystify DAX, help us understand it a little bit better and alleviate any concerns.
So, but maybe we have to cancel this because I lost my share button. How can I share my screen?
Let's see. That's all right. I'm gonna make you the host.
Ah,
Any better?
share screen, here we are. Thank you. So, then I start, right? And it's this screen and it's this screen. And now you see.
You can see meetup.com.
Pardon? Yes.
We can see meetup.com on your screen.
Okay, so, and here's my presentation. It's a PBIX file. And after this presentation, I try to copy the link where you can download this PBIX file into the Zoom chat. If I fail, I will send Pete the link. So I do not have slides. I have a PBX file data, and sooner or later you can download this PBX file. So since the availability of Fabric, even in private preview, this is I call it my new love. But I still love writing DAX because I consider it amazing when you do this and do that and you suddenly see things that you wouldn't be able to see before without this DAX statement. So basically this is the same when writing a revealing SQL statement. And since the beginning of Power BI, I'm using Power BI, and together with Phil Seemack, I also wrote a book about DAX. So this also tells something about me that I do not have kids. Probably no other hobbies than doing things like that. And on the other hand, all these data things earned me the Microsoft MVP award. When you have this PBIX, read this, whatever you can do or are able to do with this, Power BIX files, shares, spread it, burn it, whatever, you're allowed to do it unless you want to have money if you burn it publicly and getting money for that. So now starting with this, what I call DAX. So the problem with DAX, as I am facing it, or I faced it, and now my colleagues are facing it, there is no beginner and no advanced, because the problem doesn't wait until you have 1 year, 1 week, 10 years of experience. It hits you directly. So there's something that I call foundation. And then if you are not able to understand this foundation, then it will become difficult, no matter if it's called a simple DAX statement or complex DAX statement. So Bruce Lee once told or said that he does not fear the opponent who is practicing 100 different kicks. He is in fear of the opponent who is practicing one kick 100 times. So this is also something that needs to be done and doesn't stop practice. And I consider myself being good with DAX. This doesn't mean that whenever I am going to write a DAX statement that it's fast and returns a correct or expected result, let's say expected result at the first try. So, and this comes by practicing. And then there's one thing that I do whenever got hinted that it's not expected. So it's also a good idea to have a blank page except test or text if you want to set up DAX Studio and you do not want to get hassled with what is going on in the meantime when you open the PBIX file. So for this reason, the first thing I do when I start developing things is I add a blank page so that nothing is computed or things like that. And then there's something that I call universal truth. And please forgive me, I just want to say, if there are questions, please feel free. Do not wait until the end of this meeting, but please allow me to say, okay, give me 5 minutes and we will be there. Or I will say, oh, this is a really interesting question. Thank you, but I will not answer it today, or something like that. But do not hesitate and answer your question, ask your question immediately.
Yeah.
Pardon?
If I may interject for just a moment, if you have a question, just type it into the chat window. Jeff and I will be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation, and we will, if we get an opportunity to break in, Tom, we will let you know if there are any questions.
Yeah, whatever. So then this way. There's something that I consider this a universal truth. It's even more important than understanding row context, evaluation context, filter context, context transition, and all these fancy names. There is something that we should always keep in mind. And this is the first thing is what I call the hidden iterator. So when I create a DAX measure, like so, then it's called some blah, blah, blah quantity. This is internally translated into this. Meaning there's also sometimes there are discussions about what is faster, this or that. This little guy here is only syntax sugar. It will internally before it gets executed, it will be translated into this. And this little icon here is if you hover over this and hit control, blah, 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 then you will go to the video by Jeffrey Wang, where Jeffrey Wang is one of the founders of DAX, and he's telling about certain things, how DAX works and things like that. If you have never seen a video with Jeffrey Wang about talking about DAX, you miss something. So then another thing that sometimes we do not, or I realize that colleagues are not exactly using this little term like so. This is referencing a table. For example, if I use this sum x first parameter, this table iterator function is a table, and I use sum x, then I write this little thingy here, referencing a table. I refer to the already filtered table. Whatever has been selected in slicers and things will be, all these filters will be applied before the sumx function kicks in. So there's already things like that. Also, like so, if I use values, for example, to get something, for example, I use values a lot if I want to know what has been selected inside a slicer. Most, of course, I can do this with selected value, but selected value always only works if one and only one item is selected. So, but what happens if there are 2 and 3, and selecting 2 or 3 items is not an error, it's expected. So having the sum of 3 customers is a valuable result. So nevertheless, also this means values returns the already filtered, the only available values from the column sales territory from the dimension city. And basically, more or less, this is the same when distinct sales territory. So values and distinct are very close. So this is, there is, let's say, a little bit of a little differences what these functions return. Nevertheless, they return or retrieve their data from the already filtered table. This is very important. And very often we have a very simple DAX statements like this one. This means calculate expression, for example, some quantity, and then like this one here. Oh, sorry. And then this is the Boolean filter. So I call it like this, where I just want to have the value calculated where the sales territory is planes. It's also important to understand that this is also some kind of syntax sugar for this guy. So this statement right here is rewritten internally into this. I have this all around this column, and then it's filtered down where the sales territory is placed. This is essential to know because it might explain unexpected values or results. And also sometimes it's wanted, sometimes it's not expected what is returned. So this is something that I think we should never forget. What is a Boolean filter? And referencing a table like so, for example, inside the DAX, any DAX function, before this function will be calculated, everything is already filtered. So and then we have implicit filter, and I'm working with Power BI since its beginning, and I still think, sometimes I think, most of the time I think it works magically. Sometimes I think, oh, this is not working as expected at all, but most of the time I consider it's magic. So meaning I just have this little guy right here. This visual is only, sorry, I make this a little bit. Are you able to see my screen and read my screen? And if I'm seeing, are you good for that? This fact sale, this little green icon? Are you able to
Yes.
see?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see the
So,
column chart. We see the fact table.
perfect. So, and now I have this visual, and this visual only contains quantity. And because quantity is a numerical field, it will be aggregated. And all what this means is all the rows of the table where this column is coming from, it's coming from the fact sale table, will be aggregated. And this aggregation is blazing fast. And I am able to select different aggregation functions and some average whatsoever. And this is what I call magic, right? Because I love this. And because of this, when I have a measure, I need an aggregation function, except I call the result 666 or something under other things. I always need an aggregation function whenever I'm creating a measure. So this will also come a little bit later. I call this magic because I can change this, and and now I see it's 40 and whatsoever, and now I use the minimum, and then it's one. So I love that, and it's not just me. Also, some colleagues love that, because if I'm exploring data, this is cool. Or let's do this. What is the minimum? What's the maximum value, and things like that. This is cool when exploring data. Nevertheless, there are some downsides when we are using implicit measures. I come to this also a little bit later. If I remember correctly, most of the time I said I come to this a little bit later, but I really do. So, and now what this magic really is doing is, now I use the same column quantity, the numeric column quantity on the y-axis, and use sales territory on the x-axis of my amazing bar chart. So how does this work? So I just add different things like that, and how this works is based on something we might call the data model, the semantic model, the star schema, whatsoever. And there are people saying the model, the star schema, is essential for everything that works, is essential, and I am also on this party. And now this works like so. I have sales territory. Sales territory is in the dimension city. Dimension city is related to fact table using or by the city key. And now this is all the city keys belonging to southeast are used, and then for southeast, the aggregation is happening. And this flow is called filter propagation. And this is also one thing why these type of relationships, one to many, one star, one to many, is always preferred. But this flow is also working if it's one to one, but it also works. So this is implicit filtering, implicit measures, and how it works. So then I have a little slicer, it's black. And once again, I have my measure where now I'm looking for Mid-East or plains, sorry. Now it's there. It's plains. I selected the year 2013 and all these things. And I'm looking at this little guy. This is the DAX statement that is created by Power BI Desktop, and then it's pushed as a query to our beloved Vertipack engine. And here we can see, okay, somewhere black is selected from a slicer, and this year 2013 is somehow also selected because it's here. It's a row header for a matrix value. Sorry, it's a column header for a matrix value. So all these things are slicers, row headers, column headers, axes are part of the so-called filter context. The context a measure is evaluated. So what we see right here in this card visual, please forgive me that it's the most boring card visual and not the new card visual. Here we do not have the sales territory, and for this reason, it's somehow this value because black is still considered, and for whatever reason, whatever I did, it's also just 2013. So this is everything we need to know is a slicer, a filter, axis are being part of this thing called filter context. And this filter context is the context a measure will be evaluated. So, and I try to have the most simple things why I think we need measures. So we have this little table, ABC 9610, a total of 25. And this table is this average, I call this average thing, has amazing 8 rows. Sorry, 8 rows. So, and if we are looking closely, we will see that it's the value is, if I sum everything up, nothing special revenue is something that can be added by blah, 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 so we get 25. 25, cool. So now this is also, I'm still in love with that. And I think it's magic. Now I'm adding this once again. 25, oh, no surprise. And I change the average. So I have 3 companies. The average is 3 to 10. So 3 to 10. So it's not about right or wrong. It's about expectation. So I have colleagues, and I also think a little bit like that. If this column is called average of revenue, I would expect an average in the total line of 5 and not 3.57. So this is probably, someone would argue, no, it's totally correct because of. The reason is quite simple. I have 25, I have 8 lines. If I divide 25 by 8, I have this little guy. This is here, I have 3 rows composing this 9. I divide this by 3 and I divide 1 row by 1. So this is the average is 10. So, but what is if the party is we are expecting 5? We need a measure. And this is then done easily, can be done easily by doing this magic. And this is why this is one of the reasons why we need measures. It's not necessary to completely understand what this measure is doing. Even if it just has 2 lines. So what is this guy doing? It's referencing this, one of the universal truths, and then average X is iterating across a row, a table, and then this table is, and for each row, for each iterations, this expression will be calculated. So this means, if you remember, values is referencing the already filtered column. For this reason, values only has 1 row for column A. So this might be of no surprise, but sometimes this easy things can become confusing. And then for each row, 1, average is performed. So what does this average is performed? Sorry for this weird sentence. So values is iterated. It contains 1 row. So, but now the aggregation function average is applied to what? And this applied to what is essential. It's not magic, it's applied to the already filtered table, filtered by company A, and then it's averaging the 3 remaining rows. This is also for B and C, and now we have this. Then coming to average X, iterating, and for each, and then what average X is doing, it iterates and then it takes the average of the iterations, meaning summing 3 to 10, 5, calculate average, done. So this is also something, this is one of the reasons why we need average, because it's not right wrong, it's about different expectations. So then this guy here, I want to tell what is the contribution of A in the total, meaning I want to have a percentage value 9 divided by 25 and things like that. Also, it's very simple. It's like so. So, but what is the important part is this calculate. So basically we know that this is simple. Most of the time, at least I am, most of the time do not do rocket science when I'm composing DAX statements. I divide things, I multiply things, I add things, sometimes I subtract things from what other stuff. No rocket science. But then this is what calculate does. So calculate allows us to alter the filter context. This is what calculate does. So if you create a new measure, and if you want to have a simple measure that is only summing the quantity, don't do this. And I'm not talking about the spacings. Close. Wow, I'm sorry. Don't use calculate in this type of measure. Only if you want, for whatever reason, you do not want to rely on implicit measures or things like that. If you have, I call these type of measures base measures. Or because implicit measures cannot be used with the field parameter function and also not with calculation groups. It's always a good idea and best practice to use explicit measures. But don't waste a calculate if there is no filter changing or no filter modifier. The reason can be a little bit, in rare occasions, this calculate can do something, and I come to this part, and I come to this right now because I said it so often right now. At the end of all these pages, there's a little page called DAX readings and watchings. Here you will find all the beautiful people of the DAX world, and also Nikolai Ilyich and I, because the beautiful people are bold, and the other ones are maybe not that beautiful. And here, this is an article written by Jeffrey Wang. I do not know if you know this. Interesting is it's 2011 when it was published, meaning 13 years ago. I still read this article whenever on the second or third attempt my measure was not returning the expected result. And the most interesting was if you read this so the only thing you need to do to create beautiful DAX statements is reading this article and, of course, understand it. And do never ever forget subtle things. And one of these subtle things, or this is what I call the calculate mantra, is these 4 steps are happening always. Whenever a measure is referenced, whenever you're using a calculate or a calculate table, and there might be circumstances that an calculate across can impact your results. So for this reason, do not do this here. where I am. So here I was telling the percentage of revenue and things like that. And then we have this simple measure. Next step. Is this a question here?
Are you checking out the chat window?
Yeah, I was just looking at accidentally, sorry. So because it looks like, in your opinion, it's a question from you to, sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's more for at the end of your presentation. I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget to ask those.
Sorry. So this is one of the most simple DAX statements. It's do a sum of quantity where the sales territory is plates. And when I'm using this, I have this. This is something we should expect, because one of the simple or universal truths, because this is translated into an all about the column and then it filtered, meaning no matter what the sales territory is, this measure always returns the value for plates. So when we wrote this, maybe we are expecting this. Maybe we never see this happen because we never use this measure with sales territory visible in some kind of visualization. But maybe this is unexpected. And because if this measure is not called a simple measure, and it's called revenue or quantity planes, then maybe we would expect a 0 for external and only a value appear for where it should be used. So, and then there is where is it? Here we have the simple measure, and then we have this one. Basically the same result, but this time, except of course for the formatting, please forgive me, I did not format the measures. And we can do this in 3 different ways. This is, I'm using the hidden iterator, and I'm meaning sum. And there's also this universal truth, the Boolean filter, where I say planes. And then I add keep filters to, keep filters is one of the few functions that exactly do what they are named. They are keeping existing filters. Because otherwise, when I'm using this without keep filters, then this one is overwriting the existing filter context, and then it's planes even if the sales territory is north or whatever. And this is also explains this overwriting existing filter or applying new filter context. This guy is new in the context of the existing, is also one of the steps, basically, or namely, this little guy. This is what is happening. And when I'm coming back right here, keep filters just keeps it, meaning there is no plains and Mid-East at the same time. So for this reason, I cannot. I try to override New England with plains based on this new keep filters. This doesn't work. For this reason, it zeroes out or it's not. My favorite version of this function, because I always try to, is this little guy. This is how I write my measures most of the time, because most of the time I do not want to have this when sales territory is on rows or on axis. I just want to have this, meaning the other one 0. For this reason, I do this. And this is keep filters. So this is this is how I write these things, Boolean filters, and I put keep filters around it. Of course, sometimes it makes sense if this value will be repeated. As always, it depends. So I did say we do not do rocket science. At least I'm not doing rocket science all the time in writing DAX. If the result is, and because of this, it's easy that what's going wrong when the measure does not return the expected result. We did not change the filter, or we did not change the filter context correctly. Probably we have a typo, plus instead of minus, can be, but most of the time we did not manipulate the calculate. So this helps me. This knowledge helps me, because otherwise I would think, oh, it's rocket science, I have to learn this. No, it's easy things that go astray. And this is what calculate is used to change the filter context. And if I do not want to have the filter context change, I do not use calculate. Please. So calculated columns and context transition. Until now, I was talking about measures. There's a second, or basically now with the visual calculations 3. Now there is a calculated columns. Measures, calculated columns are the things I calculate quite often. Okay, virtual tables, blah, blah, blah. So this is a thing I have right here. My sales fact table, the column quantity. I visualize all this stuff for whatever reason. And now I have this. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Sorry. Oh. So it works, and it works like this. This is a fancy name, sorry. And this is the expression. Basically, it's not an expression. So what does this mean that I can write this like so? Because I was saying whenever I'm writing a measure, I need an aggregation function. I can reference a column when I'm creating calculated columns like so. This means I want to use the value of column quantity of the current row. But referencing a column inside a row is not only valid or possible when I'm creating calculated columns, it's also possible when I'm having a row context. For example, using a DAX iterator function like sum x, average x, and things like that. When I'm reading complex DAX statements and I see fancy things like so, and it's not complaining, then I know I have a row context, because otherwise I would have to use an aggregation function. But so this basically just tells me, okay, use the quantity, the value of the quantity and things like that. Now I have this guy. So this also considered a little bit of a question. Think about it. Looks similar, but is enclosed with a sum. So think about it, blah, blah, blah. Enough thoughts doing this. So now we know that Power BI is good with great numbers. It's able to calculate this insanely high number. Sometimes it looks like the number of tasks my wife was applying to me and I did not tackle. So nevertheless, we see this value is repeating for each row. I'm quite sure that it's each row because I have the sales key. So this means why is this happening? And this is, do not forget this. If I'm using an aggregation function within a row context, it's aggregating all the value from all the rows that are forming this row context. And this does not mean it's a single row. No. Forming the row context by sum, or when sum is used, it's all the rows in the current row context. This is not only valid for calculated columns. This is also valid if I'm using SumX or whatever summarized thingy functions, creating virtual tables in more complex measures. It's always all the rows. And then, of course, it's totally clear what is happening when using this fancy measure or calculated column 3. Now there's a calculate around the sum, and now the word is pretty much in order again. Everything is as expected, but what is doing calculate without using a filter context? Or sorry, without using a filter modifier parameter. Whenever I'm using calculate or calculate table, a row context is transformed into a filter context. This fancy thing is called context transition. And it's only from row context to filter context. A filter context will never ever be able to transform into a row context. This is not happening. So calculate sum. So this sometimes I have the idea that people are thinking calculate is somehow everything works or makes everything the healing whatsoever function, because now my calculated column works perfectly. So I prefer this style. I prefer this style. I do not do anything with here because I am in the row context, meaning I can reference the value of that column in the current row. This is what I'm doing. So, and now your speaker will be tested because we have this. So source data is not big data. I have this little guy here, so this little guy, and this little guy is this table called context transition. And there's no magic. It has 4 rows. And so basically it's 7, like we see it here. You see all the details. It's more, there is nothing more. So, and now I have this calculated column. It's not a measure, it's a calculated column. And now what is the expected result, not for A, not for B, instead for C, for C, for total. I'm sorry. So I will silently count to 1 billion, and then I will add this column to the table, and almost there. So it's 28. So maybe you would have been, sorry, guess this correctly or not. Maybe someone can paste, it doesn't matter. So if everyone was considering 28 or expecting 28, then we can stop right here. If there have been others expectations, this would be nice, because then I would come to the next slide in a couple of seconds or minutes before I look at this. So now it's calculate around. Remember the other page where calculate was healing the world. Everything was perfect. So when I add this, once again, wondering about the total. What's the total? So, and now, so who was expecting 11? And who was expecting 7 because of the calculate? This is one of the most intriguing things calculate is doing, and probably you have guessed 11 because you have read this DAX mantra stuffy. Did I break something? Because these are the 4 steps happening when. And the explanation of what is happening, context transition, meaning row context into a filter context, is explained right here. So I have these 4 rows. This is a row context, becomes a new filter context, is filtering the table A and 2. And because A and 2 is appearing twice, it's 4. This is happening for the second line. 4. B1, only a single appearance. And then I have this one, so and this counts for 8. This is this is most of the time when I reflect on the measures that do not work as expected the first time, it's about this context transition thing that I do not observe closely enough. Once again, it's the details. It's not because we are not smart enough. It's because we are overlooking details. No rocket science, remember? And this is most of the time, I'm not aware that this is 11 because A and 2 is filtered twice. This, of course, is not happening here because I have a sales key. This cannot happen here. So please don't add a row identifier to each of your immensely large fact tables, because then your size of your model will explode. Don't do that. Instead, be aware that context transition means creating a filter context from the row context. So we are almost done. Now dates are special. I have a not. So simple DAX statement that returns this. And this is return filter something where the filter is, so this is the table, and the table should contain all the years that are equal or smaller than the current year. No magic. And I'm also referencing, I'm only referencing, if you look closely, this little simple calendar table. I'm just using this simple calendar table. There's no hidden meaning or things like that. And now I go here and go for my little model. And there's this relationship. Makes absolutely sense. Going back here. This is the weight WTF measure. No stuff related. So, and if I go here, it's only simple calendar. It's not the simple fact table. Nothing is, fact table is not used. So basically, my question to you guys, ladies and gentlemen, if I delete this relationship, will this impact the result of the measure? Yes, no, maybe, probably my MacBook will burn when I do this. Who knows? Doing this, going back right here, magic, isn't it? So why is this happen? This is because dates are special. And whenever we have a date table marked as, or a table marked as a date table, and this date table has a relationship to other things, then whenever I use this, all the existing filter will be deleted, meaning because I use the date The existing filter 2014 will be deleted for this year. Will be deleted for this year, 2015. Then I use distinct of year, and I just have 2014 and 15. And if I'm going back to this, re-establishing my date relationship from simple calendar one to many blah single whoops. This is something that also can cause confusion, but probably it will not, because you're all building your star schemas and have the relationships. Everything is works, so you will not be confused. This little thing is explained in the second article by Jeffrey Wang, and this is also this guy here. So I think it's enough to understand DAX. It should be enough reading this article and this article, and then you're good to go and conquer the world. Theoretically, I'm still reading this article, I guess. Yeah, I will not stop doing this because it's the details. And with this said, feel free for questions. Thank you for listening, and please excuse me, I wasn't sure. So I said 65, 70 minutes, but I guess we are good to go. And if there are questions, do so.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I think you came in right at about 60 minutes, so that was just about perfect. And while we look through the questions, if you want to, if you can upload the PBIX to the chat, or maybe there's a link. Do you have it on your GitHub, perhaps? But maybe we can share the PBIX with.
No. What? So I try my best.
Okay.
And now go to chat.
Yes.
And hit Command V, and here we are.
Excellent. Thank you. I think that'll be very useful for everyone who is on today's call.
So at least you are able to see that something arrived.
Yes.
So I'm pretty much a Zoom expert, I think.
Great. So Jeff, did you see any questions come through for Tom?
None came through from Tom, other than, or for Tom, but I put one in here. So Tom, what made you curious to dive deeper into DAX and become, an expert and write a book about it?
Well, because I had challenging questions. So yes, I'm considering me being an expert, but why do I want to become a DAX expert? Because I have no other hobbies or whatsoever, maybe. Basically, it's because I have challenging questions. And so then I want to know this because I want to create this report with this things. And this is the reason why I dig deeper. But so whenever I'm trying to understand or learn something new, I try to understand what is the foundation of that. So I think it doesn't matter if you know all the 700 DAX functions, maybe it's 500, and also the proper order of the parameters. It does. So I think it doesn't help. And I do not know this. I do a couple of functions by heart because I use them a lot, meaning also including not just the name, also the order of the parameters.
Mhm.
And I just want to understand how it works. So what does it mean? What is the function really returning? So especially since to JSON and to CSV, these two DAX functions have been bubbled up. I love these functions because they help me to inspect intermediate results when I create a filter table in a more complex DAX statement or things like that. And basically this is why I dig deeper, because I had to. And the reasoning behind the book is I am so impressed by Phil Seamark's book, Beginning DAX. I was so impressed that I wrote him a letter. How amazing this book is, how amazing his approach was. I guess it was a 10-page letter, and how I would things have done differently because of. And then Philip was approached by the publisher and was asked, do you want to write a pro? Yes, of course I want to. And then Philip reached out to me and asked me if I want to be a co-author. And I said yes. Wasn't aware that this is time consuming. So this is how it happened. Yes.
Putting some links in the chat to both Phil's original book on DAX, and I'm also going to link to the book that you two wrote together.
So
ProDAX.
if some of you is really new to DAX, then start learning DAX by Phil's book. This is the first book you should read if you want to learn DAX. If you're totally new, new experience, blah, blah, blah. Then, if you want to add something, then use the DAX Patterns book from the Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari. Then, if you want to understand how DAX works, it's this funny book about, I forgot the name. It's also by the, damn, how can this happen? Also by Marco Russo, the Thingy Guide to Whatsoever DAX. So this is, if you have still enough or not, these are the 3 books you should read. If you buy the products book, it's about what you can do besides the obvious. So this is, let's say, also some kind of what can be done, but sometimes I think you need the Italian book, why it works, what we did. So so DAX is amazing. And this is so, sorry, back in a second.
I think when Tom gets back, we'll probably close. I don't see any questions.
So sorry. The third book is The Definite Guide to DAX.
Yeah.
So, but this book, The Definite Guide to DAX, is essential. But only if you want to understand how and why it works. It's definitely not for learning DAX. So this is my opinion.
Well, I put a link to all of those books in the chat. I've got a couple of those myself. I have both of Marco and Alberto's books.
Good.
I'm ashamed to say that I don't have your book, Tom. I need to add that to my library.
Doesn't matter. So so if you order tomorrow, it's okay. Kidding.
As long as I order it eventually.
Yes. So if you order it eventually, I'm happy.
All right. Well, very good. Tom, thank you so much. This has been very enlightening. Even for veteran DAX
Perfect.
professionals, I think that there is some very good information in here. So certainly appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, thank you from everyone for your time. Everyone, as always, I'm going to send out an email probably this evening or tomorrow. I'm going to include links to everything. I'm going to try to include a copy of the PBIX file that Tom circulated, and lots more information to come. Jeff, do you have anything to add before we close?
No, just thank you, Tom. Some of the things that you went through, I think are great practical examples of what a lot of folks, at least I know, that are new to Power BI experience when they're building, creating DAX formulas, and particularly when they use Calculate. I think a lot of people, including myself on this, use Calculate as sort of a crutch, right? And they just throw a Calculate on it and it'll work magically. But as you showed, that's not always the case. So I'm glad that you were able to break that down for us.
You're welcome. And it took me, I wasn't born with that. And as always, or basically as we all, I learned some of the things the hard way. Okay, so once again, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. We will see you next month.
See you, everybody.